Tonight on our front, we review one of the most politically intense periods in our history, the first quarter of this year, 2022, after this break. You're welcome back. This is Upfront. My name is Raymond Alkwa. Now, from the fuel and city crisis culminated into fears of an economic meltdown to a protracted political stalemate in Parliament, which even got the judiciary involved, the first quarter of 2022, which just ended, is perhaps one of the most intense and eventful in a long while. Tonight, we'll engage one of the main players in this political game, the opposition National Democratic Congress. Well, joining me in studio is its National Communications Officer, Sami Jemfi. You're welcome, boss.
Thanks for having me.
I hope you are doing well today.
I can't complain.
Yes, I want us to start from what's currently the conversation beginning this week, because it's just last week that this period you're talking about ended. The President of the Republic of Ghana did a very important interview. At the core of it was to engage and let the world know that after launching Destination Ghana, Ghana should be the destination for tourism and everything that you want to do on a holiday. That interview has gotten different reactions. You heard that, right? You watched it.
Yes, a very good evening to all our cherished viewers. I've watched excerpts of the interview.
Okay.
And what I saw in that interview was a president who is not willing to accept responsibility for his own mismanagement and the failings of his government. I saw a president who has lost touch with the realities of his people, a president who has become increasingly intolerant due to, obviously, the intoxication of power.
Really?
And so, as a Ghanaian...
He did an excellent performance defending Ghana at every
What was
level.
excellent about what he said in that interview, I felt embarrassed as a Ghanaian watching our president speak that way. Because all the things he said in that interview were false. And the
Really? All?
And the interviewer, the host, actually exposed all those falsehood that he sought to peddle. And you realize that ruffled him. And as egoistic as he is, and as we know him to be, he took offense and started describing some of the questions of the interviewer as provocative when those questions were very harmless questions.
I mean, it's not unexpected that when you're in a banter with somebody over any interview,
it wasn't a banter, it was an interview. You understand?
It was an engagement that required him to
And there's a
respond.
journalist who is not from Ghana, who doesn't live here, and who wants to understand why Ghana, which used to be one of the shining examples relative to our economic position in Africa, has all of a sudden seen its economy deteriorating, and why we are performing so terribly, okay, currently. And so one would have expected our president to be honest and to have approached that conversation with a sense of candor and make concessions, okay, relative to his government's mismanagement and recklessness that have brought us here and what they intend to do to bring us out of this bottomless pit they have plunged the country into. And first of all, let me go into some specifics, because first of all, when the president was told that Ghana's economy is in a terrible situation, he said that was not the case. But we know that is the case. That's the first falsehood he peddled. Ghana's economy has collapsed.
Really? What's the basis of this claim? Economy that's currently still paying salaries. Economy that's actually running. Economy that just left off with some GDP growth rate of the last quarter in an
of 0.4%. Let's take the issues.
That is 2020.
Let's take the issues.
Since then, we've not had 0.4%.
Let's take the issues.
We've had way better GDP beyond
Let's take the issues one after the other.
Yes.
Okay. We are talking about an economy which has a debt to GDP ratio of about 83%. That is minus exchange rate depreciation for 2022. Because if you are to factor in the depreciation of the exchange rate, given the foreign component of our debt, you realize that our debt has ballooned to about 390 billion Ghana cedis as we speak, which is almost 90% to GDP.
As of which period are you talking about?
As of March 2022.
Okay.
If you check
so
the
this data is coming
depreciation,
from where?
because at the last time the Bank of Ghana came out with our public debt, okay, they came out with a figure of 351 billion.
That's December 2021.
2021,
Yes.
okay? And if you add the monies they borrowed, they've collateralized Get Fund for, okay, which is about 2.4 billion Ghana cedis. You add what they have collateralized ESLA for, which is another 9.4 billion Ghana cedis. And you add what they have collateralized our bauxite for, which is a little above 600 million Ghana cedis under the Sino-Hydro deal. You get a total of 661 billion, which translates into a debt to GDP ratio of 83%.
661?
Yes, billion.
661.
Yes.
From 351.
351
to 600.
Add 9.4, which is ESLA.
Okay.
Right? Add 2.4 Get Fund.
You mean 364 or you mean
36? No, did I say 600? Sorry.
Yes, so-
I mean
so that's what
361. Sorry.
Okay, yes.
Sorry, that was a slip.
Okay.
I mean 361 billion.
Yeah, I get
Definitely
you.
not
Yeah.
661 billion. So that was our debt position as at December 2021.
That's true.
And that translates into a debt to GDP ratio of 83%. And at the time, I'm sure the interbank rate was around 6.4, 6 cedis, 40 pesos, right? And obviously, the Bank of Ghana will even use an exchange rate that is lower than the interbank rate. Now, I'm saying that if you check the dollar rate today, okay, and you factor that exchange rate depreciation into our debt position now, you realize that the debt has gone up astronomically within the first quarter of 2022 alone as a result of the depreciation of the cedi. And that is something we can look at. But so already, even if we are to go with the December 2021 figures, we are dealing with a debt to GDP ratio of 83%, which is far worse than the debt position this country had when we joined HIPIC sometime in 2001. Because during that time, debt to GDP was in the 70%, column. Now we have crossed the dreaded 80% mark. We are on our way to 90%. Apart from that, we are talking about an economy that debt, two budget line items alone, that is debt servicing, okay, and compensation, the salaries and wages of public sector workers, consumes about 90% of our tax revenue. And here I'm talking about 2021. Okay, and even for 2022, if you look at the projections, the revenue projections, you have about 80% of total revenue being consumed by only two budget line items, because we are projecting an unrealistic, overly ambitious total revenue of 100.5 billion, which is not something practicable, something we can achieve, because we are seeking to increase tax revenue from 55 billion in 2021 to 80 billion. And the pundits, the economics, the experts have said that that is mission impossible. But assuming without admitting that we will even be able to rake in total revenue of 100.5 billion as we have projected, government projects to spend 46 billion of that on debt servicing alone. Interest payment alone is costing us some 36 billion. You add that to amortization of 9 billion, you have almost 46 billion for debt servicing. Compensation is about 36 billion. That alone gives you a total of 81 billion out of that total revenue projection of 100.5. So if you have this economy without any fiscal space to do anything, it means that when you are done servicing your debt for 2022, when you're done paying public sector workers, you don't even have enough revenue left to take care of statutory payments, because you have a statutory payment allocation of 31 billion. And what will be left after you've taken care of these two items will be less than 20 billion. And that cannot take care of even statutory payments, which you are bound by law to meet. And this is aside the allocation that government has made for capital expenditure, which is developmental infrastructural projects of 16 billion, and goods and services of 9 billion. It means that government must borrow minimum 37 billion.
Or raise money internally, which it did with e-levy.
No, all the monies, e-levy and everything put together is what they are projecting will give them tax revenue of 80 billion. And in addition to other revenue streams, total revenue of 100.5 billion. So this is all total revenue, all they are projecting to get, minus borrowing.
And what is the point you get to the point where this indicates economic collapse?
Yes, I'm coming. So you don't have any fiscal space. You don't have money to even patch potholes on your roads. You don't have money to even buy A4 sheets for the office of the president and government agencies to run. You don't have money to buy fuel, all these monies. Now we are borrowing to service our debts. We are borrowing to service interest on our debt. Now, that aside, we are talking about an economy, the Ghanaian economy now, with one of the highest budget deficits in the sub-region, which is actually what has led to the astronomical, unsustainable debt levels we have. A budget deficit of 15.7% in 2020, the highest in the sub-region, and a budget deficit of 12.1% for 2021, which actually shows that our government has been reckless, particularly in the last 2 years, relative to spending. They've not spent or lived within their means. Okay.
But they have explained
now,
this, right?
I will come to the explanations. I want to show you why our economy is in a terrible situation and the president cannot run away from that. Now, because of this, Ghana has now been classified as a country which is almost at a debt distress level. And that has totally dampened business confidence in our economy. And that is why, for the first time in the history of this country since we attained lower middle income status, we have been downgraded by sovereign credit rating agencies like Fitch to B- and by Moody's to CAA1. Never in the history of this country, since we attained lower middle income status, have we declined to that level. That's number one, CAA1. And you can read about that categorization or that classification. These are the CAA1 classification of Moody's is for junk economies, you understand? And that is why, for the first time in the history of this country, since we became a lower middle income country, we've lost access to the capital market. We cannot go to the capital market to issue euro bonds in 2022. I'm coming. So I'm showing you.
Situate all of this within the current condition we find ourselves.
If you have got into a stage...
The pressures from...
No, hold on.
The COVID-19 difficulties that most economies across the world...
Did Cote d'Ivoire experience COVID-19?
Of course, it's also...
Have they lost access to the capital market?
But that's a different form you're talking about.
Why? You are talking about COVID-19, which is a common denominator.
Yes.
It affected all countries in the world. It affected our neighbors, our peers. Countries like Togo, Burkina Faso, Cote d'Ivoire, Nigeria. Yeah. They all experienced COVID-19. They've also experienced the negative effects of the Russian-Ukrainian conflict.
But you know that the argument is not that it is only COVID-19 that's brought us where we are.
So what is the argument?
That it's a contributory factor.
So what are the other factors? So I am talking to you about the other factors.
Okay. So when you listen, have left this one out in a way that suggests that those ones did not exist.
First of all, I'm not responding to Raymond Akwa because you have been very precise. I'm responding to President Akufo-Addo. And if you listen to his interview on BBC, he blamed all our economic woes on COVID-19 and other global factors. At no point did he allude to any contributing factor that was internal. He said that all economies of the world are on their knees, which is a lie. Yes, all economies of the world are facing challenges, but the challenges are not the same. And that is why the CFA of La Côte d'Ivoire and Togo is performing better than the Ghana cedi. Today, the Ghana cedi is the worst performing currency in Africa, and I dare say the world, second only to the ruble of Russia. Even the kwacha of Zambia is doing better than our currency. Our peers, our neighbors have not lost access to the capital market like we have lost access to the capital market. Our neighbors are not experiencing capital inflow reversals like we have recorded in the first quarter of 2022, especially, which is what accounts for the alarming rate of depreciation. In the first quarter of 2022 alone, the cedi depreciated by almost 20%. Check our neighbors. Which of our neighbors experienced that relative to their currency? So that brings me to what you said, the other contributing factors, the underlying conditions of our economy, which is what has reduced us to the ashes we find ourselves into. And that is very simple. We are not in this economic quagmire because of COVID-19 necessarily, or because of the Russian-Ukrainian conflict necessarily, but it is because in the year 2020, or even before the year 2020, okay, because you will recall that before this government took office, they berated the ex-Wal NDC Mahama administration for what they describe as financial recklessness and indiscipline on our part. And so in 2017, when they took office, they passed a Fiscal Responsibility Act.
Yeah.
And said they are not going to be indisciplined and reckless like the NDC. They will never exceed a budget deficit of 5%. And if you don't understand what I mean by budget deficit, I'm just talking about the difference between what government gets in terms of revenue and what they spend. Okay? Which is a measure of how disciplined and prudent you are as a manager of an economy. They said they will not exceed 5% of GDP. But now, when COVID struck and they went to IMF for that $1 billion rapid credit facility, the first one, and they presented documents and figures about the state of our economy, we realized that, yes, in 2017, budget deficit was 4.8%.
Yeah.
But when they took office, budget deficit, the rebase one for 2016 was 6.1. They said that was unacceptable. They were not going to go above 5%. So in 2017, they did 4.8. In 2018, they did 7%, something they concealed from the people of this country. Then in 2019, they did 7.5%. That was before COVID. Then COVID struck in 2020, and that is when their recklessness reached a crescendo. They went on an election-related, consumption-related spending spree and recorded the highest budget deficit ever recorded in the fourth Republican history of this country, 15.7%. All the countries around us who also experienced COVID-19 didn't exceed a budget deficit of 7%. We did 15.7% because, you know why? Because total revenue for 2020...
We spent a lot in managing the COVID-19 and did it so well
like what?
that we have to pump money into it.
We spent a lot. We spent a lot. We spent a lot in managing COVID-19.
Yes.
Such that 2 years after recording our first case of COVID, we still don't have any testing center in our international airport that we can call our own to even do a simple or a common antigen test.
All right.
We've brought some phony company, Nigerian-related company, that is charging, I mean, they used to charge citizens of this country $150 per antigen test, and they are still charging non-ECOWAS citizens $150, a clear ripoff. We can't even boast of a testing center at our international airport. Well, we spend so much on COVID-19, such that in the procurement of vaccines from, some phony intermediaries, Sputnik V vaccines, we ended up padding the price of those vaccines by $10, almost 100%. That is how well we have managed COVID-19. We've managed COVID-19 so well that we claim to have spent 55 million Ghana cedis, equivalent to 550 billion old Ghana cedis, on the distribution of hot meals and dry food to a few people, a handful of people, in Kumasi, Kaswa, and Accra during a 3 weeks partial lockdown. 550 billion on kinke without fish, rice without even chicken. We claim to have spent another $100 million, which is equivalent to 600 million Ghana cedis as at the time.
What's your grants
on the
for
procurement
expenditures?
Because you know that purchasing one kunku, that is how we call it in the Ghanaian, setting, of hand sanitizer for every SHS student, 3 Veronica buckets for every secondary school, and 2 reusable face masks for every SHS student cannot cost 6 trillion old Ghana cedis.
This is because the Auditor General says so?
This is because the expenditure simply doesn't make sense. Even if those face masks and those hand sanitizers were made from heaven by angels, were made from gold and diamonds, it will not cost a whopping 600 million Ghana. And that is why this government doesn't want us to probe COVID-19 expenditure. So let nobody deceive you that Ghana managed. COVID has rather been an avenue for this government to fleece the state coffers. And that is why they cannot allow any forensic audit or bipartisan probe into COVID-related expenditures. You understand? How can anybody say that we have managed COVID so well? We've managed COVID so well when the facts show the president has said in the State of the Nation address that the total expenditure of this government on COVID-19 since 2020 is 17.7 billion. A lie?
Yes, that's what.
17.7 billion. How much did we rake in revenue because of COVID? In excess of 36 billion. The World Bank has given us $2 billion because of COVID. A lie? 2021 $1 billion rapid credit facility. 2021 budget support of $1 billion, $2 billion. No government in the history of this country has had $2 billion from the IMF. This government has had $2 billion. If you use the exchange rate of even 6 Ghana cedis for that, that is 12 billion Ghana cedis. They went to Parliament for approval to borrow 10 billion cedis from the central bank because of COVID. And ended up exceeding that by 100%. So they borrowed 20 billion. Add the 20 to the 12 billion the IMF gave us. That is 32 billion. Then come to the World Bank. The World Bank gave us $430 million because of COVID. This government hid that from us. They told us the World Bank gave us only $100 million. It had to take the country director of the World Bank to expose this fact to the Ghanaian media and the Ghanaian people in general. Okay, add that, convert that, that's another 2.4 billion. At an exchange rate of 6 cedis. That takes the total amount of COVID-related funds that came in to 34 billion and over. I have not even spoken about the $83 million the European Investment Bank gave us. Add that one, which is around $100 million. Add that one. I'm not even talking about the COVID fund and the donations Ghanaians from all walks of life, corporate Ghana make. And so if you've had in excess of 36 billion, and you, because of COVID, and you claim to have spent a total of 17.7 billion. What have you done with the extra 19 billion? You wasted it on election 2020, okay? And even what is sad, that even in 2021, when COVID had subsided, they ended up spending more than they spent in 2020. I am showing you why we find ourselves in the present economic malaise, okay, that people have seen and they are talking about. In 2020, we had a total expenditure of 100 billion Ghana cedis, almost 100 billion. Total revenue was 55 billion, expenditure 100 billion. So the difference was a deficit of 45 billion. That translates into 15.7% of GDP. In 2021, when one expected this expenditure to go down because the COVID situation has subsided and we're not spending on COVID-related, initiatives like we did in 2020, we ended up spending 111 billion. When we had spent 100 billion in 2020, when COVID was at its peak, we spent 111 billion. And total revenue was 70 billion, a deficit of 41 billion, translating into 12.1% of GDP. Now, when you don't live within your means and you overspend at such an alarming rate, you will have to borrow to finance that deficit. And that is why our debt has galloped, has gone up astronomically from the 120 billion we bequeathed to them as of December 2016 to now 363 billion as of December 2021. Never in the history of this country. Check our peers. None of them have witnessed this astronomical accumulation of debt. And so all the monies we are generating as a people, all the taxes we are paying, the COVID levy of 1% on VAT, the COVID levy of 1% on NHIL, we are spending almost 40 to 50% on that, on just debt servicing. We are spending another 30 to 40% of that on just compensation.
And that's the point you made.
And we have very little left to do all the other important things. And that is why we are not seeing good growth.
All of this does not mean that the economy has collapsed.
The economy, if people are shy, if investors, if you've lost access to the capital market, nobody wants to loan you money again. Do you have an economy? Do you have an economy?
Has it ever happened to us before?
Last year, November, we issued green bonds. We didn't get $1.
Did they happen to us in 2015?
No.
Did they happen to us in 2016?
No.
Not even in 2014?
We never lost access to the capital market under the Muhammad administration.
Take your time.
You understand?
I'm coming to this point because you make it look like the economy currently has collapsed, but that's not the case.
If the economy has collapsed to the extent that you've lost access
to an extent.
To the extent that you've lost access to the capital market, you've been downgraded to CAA1, your worst performance ever in that Moody's rating.
But that's not the worst performance. That's not the worst rating angle, right? CAA1 is not the worst.
But it's the worst for Ghana.
Yes, it's the worst for Ghana,
And
but
that's
it's not
what
the
is
worst.
important. And the worst among our peers.
Yes, but that's not the dispute I'm coming to. I'm saying that
So you
there
want
are
us
other lower ones
in other
below
words,
that
you
particular
see
point.
F,
And I'm trying to
when
say
we went
that,
to school, let me tell you something.
that's a sign
When
that we
went to
have
school,
not collapsed the
which
economy. It's not so.
which university did you go to, Raymond?
Which you know, University of Ghana. Of course.
F is what? Below 50?
No, I think
Below 40.
yeah.
Below 40. So in other words, we've gotten 35, which is F. But you're saying that because we have not declined to 0.
I'm saying that we are 50. We have not gotten to 35 yet. That's my point.
You've gotten to 35. F. You're worse.
We'll dispute that, but
So
let's move beyond this point because, okay.
In situating
I was
this
asking
within the
you to
state of
justify
the
your
economy
claim
and the
that
performance
we
of this
have
government
collapsed
within the
this
first,
economy.
that is it. You've collapsed this economy to the extent that debt to GDP is 83%, heading to 90%.
There are countries with more
You
than
don't have any fiscal space.
83% debt to GDP.
My brother.
That's not the most important point. You know that.
Check for all those countries.
Yeah.
Check their domestic revenue, the ratio of their
Brilliant.
domestic
So now
revenue.
you're bringing the other point.
Exactly.
You have not
spent.
to me that this economy has collapsed. That's my important
If you're
point.
spending almost 100% of your tax revenue, all the taxes we collect in Ghana, we are spending that on debt servicing. And how do you call it?
At least we can still service our debt.
Is that?
At least we can still service our debt.
But
At
you're
least we are
spending
paying
everything on that.
remuneration.
You're
Yes,
paying
I
everything
get you.
on that.
We are in a tight corner. But you cannot say that this is a collapse situation. That's what I want you to
So you want me to say why it is a near collapse situation? That you can engage in all the semantics.
Okay, but I want to move on beyond this point.
But you see,
I've made the point. I need to move
let
on
me just
beyond this
land.
point. Yes.
You see, what is the reality, the stark reality Ghanaians are facing today?
Admittedly, government
Really?
says we are in a difficult position.
And they are blaming that on COVID-19. The two main underpinning factors for the excruciating economic hardships Ghanaians have experienced from January 2022 to March is the issue of persistent increases in fuel prices. Not just persistent and astronomical increases in fuel prices that have seen a gallon of diesel and petrol increase from 30 Ghana cedis as of January this year to almost 45 Ghana cedis as of March this year. The second factor is the alarming depreciation of the Ghana cedi. Here we are talking about almost 20% depreciation within the first quarter, which has eroded the profit margins and the capital of businesses. Businesses are suffocating because of that. And that is what has accounted for the double-digit high inflation we are recording in this country. Inflation of almost 16%. And the major factor is food inflation. Did you know that in 2016, when we were leaving office, a bag of maize, a sack of maize, the big one, was selling at 170 Ghana cedis. Today, I just checked before I got here, it is selling at over 600. In some places, 620, in other markets, 650. From 170 Ghana cedis to 620, 650 Ghana cedis. That is a bag of maize.
You made your point.
What has COVID? What is the nexus between COVID-19 or the Russian-Ukrainian conflict and this astronomical increase in the price of a bag of maize? A bag of kokunte has moved from 200 Ghana cedis as of December 2016 to now 550 Ghana cedis as we speak. A bag of sachet water has moved from 100.
That's reflecting on the inflation we currently have, right? 50%.
1 cedi 50 pesos to now 8 Ghana cedis, right? A ton of iron rods, the 16mm iron rods, it used to be 2,800 in 2016. Now it is selling at 6,000 Ghana cedis.
Government has not dismissed current difficulties and the inflation. It's known to everybody.
But they have not accepted responsibility for that problem, and they are not fixing that problem in honesty. What has brought us what has created this problem is their reckless spending and unbridled borrowing. And what you expect them to do is to cut down on expenditure in truth. What are we seeing? Even after they announced the cosmetics expenditure cuts, haven't we seen our president flying in his usual baby, the Boeing 737 LX? Yes, that cost this country almost $20,000 per hour from North Carolina to, from Washington, D.C. to North Carolina, and from North Carolina to London. Do you know how much that trip alone is costing the poor taxpayers of this country? 3.5 million Ghana cedis. That is some 35 billion old Ghana cedis. In the last 1 year, from May last year till now, this president has blown over 28 million Ghana cedis. That is 280 billion old cedis on just his luxurious, travels in these hyper ultra hyper expensive private jets that even Arabian kings and Russian oligarchs will be jealous of. How can you be living this way and still say that, oh, we accept that times are hard? That is not enough.
Because they've cut back their salary
you have to,
to about 30%.
You have to take cognizance.
They've also reduced the expenditure plan for the country.
The president's
discretionary expenditure rate.
Article 71 holders on the back of the Yah Intiam Wabedu committee report saw between 50% to 70% increase in their emoluments. The president said he was rejecting his, and that his ministers should follow suit. It's been 1.5 years. The ministers and deputy ministers didn't do that. So what is the justification that this time around they are even going to cut down on any salary reductions as they have promised? Because they've said that in time past and we've not seen that reflect. But you see, my point is that...
Moving on to this...
My point is that, I just want to conclude on this and you come in. My point is that our city is not depreciating at this alarming rate because of COVID. COVID rather even helped the city to be strong. Because way before COVID, in 2019, the city depreciated by a whopping 12.9%. And that is why in January that year, I brought that story. January 2020, we recorded our first 2 cases of COVID-19 on 12th of March 2020. You remember?
Yeah.
But on the 17th of January 2020, government inaugurated a committee to investigate the depreciation of the city. When COVID came...
It's not the first time we've done this.
But I'm saying that don't create the impression that, because the president said in that interview that before COVID, all was well with our economy. That is not true. Before COVID, your deficit was 7.5%, higher than the 5% you had set for yourself in the Fiscal Responsibility Act. Before COVID, debt to GDP had crossed 62%. The World Bank country director has said that before COVID, our economy was on its way to the intensive care unit. The signs were clear on the wall that our economy was not strong. The fundamentals were very weak. Before COVID, your currency had depreciated by 12.9%, and you have set up a committee to investigate that. Before the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, in 2021 alone, a price of a gallon of diesel and petrol had gone up by 9 Ghana cedis. We started January 2021 with the price of a gallon of diesel at about 21, 22 Ghana cedis. We ended the year 2021, last year, with the price of diesel and petrol, a gallon of that, selling at about 30 Ghana cedis. A cumulative increase of 9%, unprecedented in the history of this country. That was way before the Russian-Ukrainian conflict that started on 24 February 2022. Even in this year, 2022, from January to February, the price of a gallon of diesel and petrol had gone up by 3 Ghana cedis, from 30 cedis to 33 Ghana cedis. So stop making excuses for your own failings, for your own cluelessness, incompetence, and recklessness.
Obviously,
accept that we are in...
We disagree with the president on what's really brought us here.
Exactly.
Now, I am moving to the other issues you raised on this one because it's important. Within this same period, and you have talked about how we have managed the fuel and the city crisis that we've had, and the very options that government has put on the table. You also know one very person enthused with the very cutback measures that the government is putting in place. Now, I want us to look at what's happening in Parliament. E-levy was finally passed. Were you disappointed?
Well, it depends on how you look at it. I was not disappointed because our gallant 137 NDC members of Parliament stood and fought for the good people of this country.
Actually, they walked out.
Yes. And they did that in solidarity with the good people of this country.
Some say it was a poor strategy.
I will explain to you that it was not a poor strategy at all. But for their patriotism and that nationalistic advocacy and resistance they mounted against the e-levy would have been passed sometime in November last year or latest 1st January 2022. The reason why the e-levy...
What changed this time around?
No, please, let's first of all appreciate what they have done. Okay? Because
but that's the
there
job.
were many
were...
national interest ambassadors who were deployed to get the NDC minority in Parliament to see reason with government for the e-levy to be passed.
So they
there were suggestions. There were a lot of pressures. There were a lot of offers. Some MPs were presented with monies and all that. Some in spite of their ill health. Some in spite of undergoing surgery. Some in spite of family responsibilities and all that. Made it a point to be in the chamber of Parliament anytime the 2022 budget or the e-levy came up. And they did that in service of the good people of this country. And we must show appreciation for that. Either than that, we would have started paying e-levy from January till March. You see, when the e-levy came up the last time, the reason why
they play their role, that's exactly what you're saying. Their role is to check government in parliament.
And when you
their role is to represent the people.
Yes, but when you give people you've given President Akufo-Addo a role, is that what he's doing? So if you give the minority, the opposition a role, and they live up to expectation, and they perform that role, they deserve to be commended. Now, what happened that you are describing as a poor strategy was not poor strategy at all, because you do know that we have 137 members of parliament. The NPP also has 137, but they have an independent MP from Fomena who does business with them that gives them 138. Yes, Adjo Asafo was not around, and so they had 137, but they had a sick chieftaincy minister, Hunter West MP, Honorable Kwechukwu. We understand, in an ambulance within the precincts of Parliament. At some point, he was conveyed to his office, and the plan was that when the time came for voting, they were going to bring him in to vote. So roughly, they had 137. But we did not have 137 on that fateful day, because the Court of Appeal in Cape Coast had dismissed our stay of execution. You know, I'm talking about the sin of struck it out. The same thing as dismissal, because
no, but Dr. Ines separates the two and says they are not the same.
Technically, legally speaking, they are not the same.
Okay.
So you know that the Cape Coast High Court had annulled the assent of parliamentary elections on grounds that our candidate, Honorable Jachi Kwesi, was not qualified, a decision we disagree with. And so we appealed that, and pending the appeal, filed an application for stay of execution, which suspended that ruling, that judgment and order of the Cape Coast High Court. Because the Cape Coast High Court even injuncted the MP from holding himself out as an MP, and breaching that is contempt. But because we filed an application for stay of execution, it allowed him to go to Parliament for the time being. That application for stay of execution was struck out for non-compliance by the Court of Appeal. Okay? That decision was also a very bad decision, not even supported by the facts, because they referred to a notice of appeal which was filed on 4th August, when our notice of appeal was filed sometime on the 28th of July, I believe. And so what they did was patently flawed. But whether we disagree with that is not the issue. Even if the law is what the court says it is, and until it is set aside, it is the law. So what that meant was that for that time being, Honorable Kwesi could not go to Parliament. If he had attempted to do so, he would have been walking into a landmine. And our leaders, our caucus leadership, upon consultation with the lawyers among them, decided that no, we're not going to risk it. Because these guys had deployed national security and police officers to arrest Honorable Kwesi, okay, if they saw him attempting to enter the chamber. Because
but he was in Parliament.
He was in his office. Okay. He was willing to do that. But the reality was that at that time, we didn't have any active application for stay of execution, staying the orders of the Cape Coast Court. So we had 136. So what were we supposed to do? Stay and vote with our 136. The MPP will end up getting 137 because the sick MP will come and vote for them. And then we will get 136. The e-levy gets passed, and we have no opportunity to challenge it. And so tactically, they decided that, look, let us deny the MPP of quorum for decision making, which, according to the Supreme Court, in the latest Justice Abdullah case, is 138.
Half of members.
At least half, per Article 1041. At least half of all members of Parliament must be present before Parliament can take a decision. And so we said, if we add our 136 to their 137, they have quorum. So let's deprive them of quorum, meaning that any decision they take is a nullity. That is why they walked out tactically. And that is why today we still have an opportunity to fight the e-levy. And that is why today no sensible investor will give government money on the basis of e-levy, okay, which is still being challenged in the Supreme Court. So with all that cloud of uncertainty surrounding it, they will not be able to collateralize this e-levy like the rules minister told us they were planning to do. And so it was a tactical move, and so we are hoping that
not angry with the members of Parliament.
No, initially we were all concerned, okay, because if you do not have the information the leaders of our caucus had at the time they took that decision, you would think that they did something wrong. But when some of us got briefed, we realized that there was a lot of wisdom in the decision they took. Because if they had sat through that, the situation would have been different. And so what we should, before you ask me that question, what we should be focusing on is the president we elected, his vice president, Alhaji Bawumia, the MPP, who are the reason for all this brouhaha over e-levy. Why is it that these people who promise to move us from taxation to production, promise to reduce taxes, are imposing a draconian, punitive, deterrent, obnoxious 1.5% e-levy on us, when they know that that levy will lead to double taxation? That levy will be applied on medium of payment, which is not done in any advanced country. You cannot tax somebody, for example, for writing a check, because it is a medium of payment. And so you cannot charge me money for using Momo to pay for a service or for paying for any goods. Yet this government is doing this. They know that when we do our normal Momo transfers, the telcos deduct fees. If you transfer 1,000 Ghana cedis, for example, a fee of 10 Ghana cedis will be deducted, or you will have to top up and pay for that. If the one going to withdraw will also have to pay that same fee. And the telcos pay their taxes on all these things. And so why tax the already impoverished Ghanaian again for deciding to use these digital mediums of payment?
If the NDC now wins elections in the future, will the NDC repeal the e-levy act?
The General Secretary of the party has already said so. He's my boss. He's the Chief Executive Officer of the party. He has said so. And I believe that he has the blessing of the leadership of the party. And that is the party position, that we do not subscribe to the e-levy, and we will not continue to take e-levy from Ghanaians should power change hands. Okay? Because we need to bring some honesty to the politics we do in this country. If the e-levy is bad now, it cannot be good in 2025. And I believe that the NDC will stand by that position the General Secretary has announced. I'm even looking for a situation where that will be captured expressly in our 2024 manifesto. But you see,
I see. That's interesting.
Sometimes when you see people blame the opposition for happenings like that, it only shows that the people trust us. The people are looking up to us. We are their last hope. They've lost confidence.
Because you're still part of the governance of this country. You know that, right?
But they've lost confidence in the incumbent regime, and we are their last hope. They know that we are the only people who can fight for their interests. And so that is understandable. But what we also want them to understand is that the NDC has not tabled any tax bill, any e-levy before Parliament. We have not supported any such bill. None of our MPs even spoke in support of that bill or voted in support of that bill. We have stood against it right from the time it was announced in November 2021 last year in the 2022 budget till the time that it was bulldozed through by the majority. And we have not, this battle has only begun. We are going to fight it to the very end and make sure that the e-levy is...
Was you and the rank and file of the party, was you and the rank and file of the party disappointed in the role of the speaker?
Why?
First one to the passage of the e-levy.
Has the speaker brought any e-levy bill to Parliament? He hasn't done so. He hasn't done so. And so I don't think he should be the focal point. The focal point should be those...
I said that you've answered the question. Were you disappointed?
I have answered the question. I'm saying
you're not disappointed. Is that what you're saying?
The Speaker of Parliament has not tabled any e-levy bill before Parliament. Neither has he passed any bill. He has not voted for any e-levy bill. Those who voted for that e-levy bill, even though they know that Ghanaians are going through excruciating hardships, they cannot afford fuel. They cannot afford basic commodities because of the alarming depreciation of the cedi
when he says
and the high rate of inflation we've recorded in the last few months. And yet push this obnoxious e-levy through. They are the people we must blame.
So you agree with him?
And not the speaker.
You agree with him when he says he cannot be blamed for the passage of the e-levy?
Yes, he can, definitely, absolutely. He cannot be blamed. And I heard President Akufo-Addo lying that Ghana is the country with the lowest tax to GDP ratio.
He didn't say that. If it's in the interview, he said it's one of the lowest.
We are not even one of the lowest, because our tax to GDP ratio for 2021 was 12.6%, almost 13%, right? The tax to GDP ratio of Nigeria is 6%. So what is he talking about? And I can give you the statistics. There are many other African countries that have lower tax to GDP ratio than Ghana.
I said that we move beyond that point.
Do you know the average? Do you know the average tax?
So that we stay within.
Hold on. Do you know the average tax to GDP ratio of West Africa. The president said, what, 18%? No, it is 13%. And so 13.5% is the average. And so if Ghana has a tax to GDP ratio of almost 13%, with a sub-regional average at 13.5%, you cannot say that Ghanaians are under taxed. Really? You see, this president doesn't know what time it is.
About the president,
he's lost touch with the realities in this country.
Look, I need you to answer for me.
Look.
No, so sorry.
Ghana is one of the countries that is highly taxed. In fact,
with respect,
overtaxed.
that's not the central focus.
But what is the central focus?
The question I'm asking you, we were in Parliament about the role of the party and everything. Now, recently, there's another development that's raising concern. What does the NDC officially think about the referral of 3 members of Parliament to the Privileges Committee?
The party leadership is currently considering that issue. As National Communications Officer, no position has been communicated to me yet. And
but
so
members of Parliament has taken some positions.
Exactly, and the party...
The leadership is opposing
the leadership of the party is consulting our caucus leadership and other stakeholders, okay? And I can tell you that by the end of this week, a clear position will be communicated to the public as to what the NDC stands for relative to those 3 absentee members of Parliament. As a lawyer, and knowing what the decision of the Court of Appeal was in the case of Asare versus Attorney General, the Amwatin case, I have my position, okay? But that is not the position of the party.
What's your position on it?
I'm not able to tell you my position. Let's wait for the party's position.
You are no timoroso, are you?
I'm not a timoroso, but you are a communications person and you know that I am not sitting here as Sami Jenfi. I'm sitting here as the National Communications Officer of the NDC, and I must communicate the positions of the NDC. And I have been told by leadership
are you
that I should stand by.
Are you opposed to the fight put up by the leadership of Parliament on your side against the Speaker's referral?
I don't have a position on that yet. Let's wait for the party's position on that. And I've told you that by the end of this week, that position
What's
will
the
be communicated.
sentiment among your rank and file on this? Sentiment?
No such thing has been communicated to me, Raymond. I think we should move to other issues. My position on this is that the party has not yet taken a position. Leadership is still consulting. A position will be taken and will be duly communicated to the public.
Now, is that how mostly you operate? The minority would do their thing, then the party will take that decision, they will reconcile, or mostly it comes for the party? I just want to know how you operate within the relationship between party and the leadership in Parliament.
Well, you see, when things come up in Parliament, in the heat of the moment, you do not expect our caucus leadership to tell the Right Honourable Speaker that, hold on with proceedings, let's go out and consult our leadership before we communicate a position. And so once you put people in leadership, you must give them some allowance because you must have trust in them that in the spur of the moment, they will be able to take decisions that will not be far removed from the general sentiments, okay, and position that the party is likely to express on such matters. But after such holding positions, that's what I call them, are taken, party leadership is always informed and consultations, go on. Sometimes where it becomes necessary that certain positions that have already been communicated to the public to be varied, those things are done. But where the positions already communicated are okay, I mean, the party respects that and gives our caucus leadership our backing. I don't know what the position of the leadership of the party will be on the issue of the 3 MPP absentee members of Parliament.
So will you summon the leadership of Parliament on your side to come and explain?
Nobody's summoning anybody. What have they done? I don't want to use the word summon.
Oh, summon. Okay, yeah, maybe you don't like. Okay.
The leadership of the party will consult.
I get
you
it.
Understand?
Now, get your question, his status. Are you worried that there will be a by-election soon?
Well, I can speak for our courts because one leg of the case is pending before the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court has set 13th of April. That's next week, Wednesday, to rule on that.
But on E-Levy, you operated as if the man is completely out of his position as a member of Parliament.
Because at the time, we had no stay of execution.
Is there a stay of execution now?
Yes. Because that same day, we filed that stay of execution.
Okay.
You understand?
I get you.
Stay of execution of the decision of the Court of Appeal to strike out that application for stay of execution.
Okay,
you understand?
Interesting.
And so these are the legal gymnastics, and sometimes it may confuse those watching. So now, legally speaking, if you ask me my candid opinion, Honorable Kwesi is still a member of parliament.
Okay.
To the extent that the seat has not been declared vacant, he can go to parliament. But as at that time, it would have been a very dangerous gamble.
Okay.
Because clearly the law was not on his side, in my candid and humble opinion, to the extent that your application for stay of execution, staying the orders of the Cape Coast High Court had been struck out. And you had not filed any stay of execution of that decision striking out that original stay of execution. You understand? And so legally speaking, I think that the position our caucus leadership took was well intended. It was a wise decision. If they had stood and fought, we would have lost by 136, 137. Even if Kwesi had managed to vote, they would have gone to court for a declaration that his vote was an illegal one. And when that vote was annulled, it would have still ended up at 137, 136. We didn't want to give them that quorum. What we have done to them now is far better, okay, than the situation they would have been in. Better for the Ghanaian people,
okay,
if we had stayed and voted. Because now there is still uncertainty about the e-levy. Investors are not too sure what our costs will say. And I am very optimistic, even though most of our people do not believe that any positive outcome, can come out of the Supreme Court action. I am waiting to see how the Supreme Court will say that quorum for decision-making in Parliament is no longer 138 but 137 because half of 275 is 137. That would clearly be ridiculous, and I'm not sure the Supreme Court will say
They say because
I think that
Kwesi was not a member of Parliament.
So even if it was 274, half is 137, and how many MPs were there? 136 in the chamber. And you cannot say that...
for president and voting, the Speaker's view on it is different from what many have expressed.
But that view is not supported by the law. And
the Speaker's view?
The Right Honourable Peter Lajite has ruled on that. Present and voting means present in the chamber. Honourable Kojo Kumu was not in the chamber of Parliament on that day when the e-levy bill was supposedly passed by the majority side. They were 136 there. Okay, and so even if they argue that because Honorable Kwesi was not an MP then, and so the total number of MPs was 274, and half of that was 137, they didn't have 137, and so they could not have taken a decision.
Fine, and let's project it to the rest of the year. How's it going to go for you?
Well, if government sit down and begin to take responsibility for their mismanagement and recklessness that have brought us to where we find ourselves in, and they begin to cut down on expenditure in a significant way, cut down on the useless, needless, luxurious travels of the president and other consumption-related expenditures, I'm sure we'll be able to make significant savings. We'll be able to reduce our budget deficits, improve our fiscals, reduce borrowing, and improve our debt position, and that may bring the lost investor confidence, back. That is what government needs to do, and we wait to see what they will do about that.
Sami, we should do this conversation again. We should.
Because there are a lot of things
that we surely will be getting into.
Especially on the economy, because we didn't get time to talk about.
Oh, really? I thought we dealt with that extensively. But thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, folks, that's where we end today's edition of UpFront. Many thanks to you for joining us on this edition.